Well, good morning, my dear friends. We are currently in the middle of letter number 5. We have explained that we're talking about the idea of Elam Haba, Gan Eden, and Elam Hazeh, this physical world. And we're discussing the differences between them. This is all to get to an eventual point. What is the ability for man? It says David HaMelech would make Hashem's name great. How did he make it great? What does that mean? So to explain that, we went into this whole insight of understanding how it works in Elam Haba, the world to come, the present world. We said Elam Haba, the Gan Eden, the whole beauty there is understanding and appreciating a level that we never had a chance to. While a physical person is alive, it is impossible to enjoy, to appreciate, to comprehend, to absorb godliness. Yeah, you see it in the baby smile, you see it in a beautiful Shabbos candle, and you see it in many ways. But to see godliness in its truth, it's not possible. But when a person, unfortunately, at the end of their life and goes to Gan Eden, now they could experience the godliness, and that's the Havana, the Bina, the appreciation, the understanding, and that's why it's called Bina, or a subcategory or result of a Chachma. So we said Elam Haba, or Gan Eden, is wisdom, is understanding, is intellectual experience of finally go, so it really is enjoyable to listen to music. I never heard music before. It is enjoyable to do such an experience. And this is the beauty of Elam Haba and Gan Eden. Then we said there's a letter Hey is that which creates the physical world. Now the letter Hey is not talking about the second letter in God's name, Yud and then Hey. We're talking about the last letter, Vav and Hey. That's Malchus. And we're going to explain now in this discussion, that's the focus today and last week and next week, this idea that the Hey is something other, it's something different. And to understand that, we say that the Gan Eden comes from Yud, but Elam Hazeh comes from Hey. What does that mean? So to understand this, the Alter Rebbe is going to go into and introduce an idea, which is going to require explanation. And the idea is Abba Yisod Barta, or correctly is Brata. The father is the foundation of the daughter. What does that mean? When we take God's name, when we did this many times, but just to do it again in a certain way, we always divide it up either as Yud is Chachma and Hey is Bina and Vav is the 6 middays and Vav and the last day is Malchus. Or we say represents Atzilus, Beri, Yitzir, and Asiya. Or we always different explanation what they mean. Another way to understand it is what's called Av V'Eim Ben Ubas. The father, the mother, the son, and the daughter. That's the whole story. The first Yud is Abba. As explained in Tanya, Chachma is the father. Bina is the mother, that's the Hey. Vav is the 6 middays, that's the son. And the Malchus at the end is the Bas, is the daughter. So we say, Abba Yisod Brata, the father Chachma is the foundation of the daughter, which is Malchus. Which begs a question. What do you mean? The father is not the daughter. The father has to go through the mother, and the mother has to go to create the son, and the son we're talking about in the Kabbalistic order, and the son has to go to. I mean, there's a process. First goes Chachma, then goes Bina, then goes the 6 middays, also known as Zah, and then goes Malchus, known as the Hey, or a lot of times we call the 6 middays and Malchus either the male and the female. Sometimes we call it Zah and Malchus. Or Zohar Nukva. It depends. The six middays are that which feeds into Malchus, which is which produces all the expression, which is thought, speech, etc., speech, and all sorts of expression to other. So the question is, why does it say Abba Yisrad Brata, that the father gives the foundation to the daughter? It should be that eventually everything comes from the Chachma. I mean, it's like saying, we spoke about many times about the idea of a tzaddik. We say this tzaddik has neshama batzilus. Every human being comes from Atzilus. The difference is you come from Atzilus direct, like the express flight from New York to Sydney, Australia, first class. You come there fresh, or you take the milk run. You make 12 stops on the way, and you came with a bunch of noisy college students. And by the time you got to Sydney, you aged 14 years. You both came from the same place, but the question is how you got there. Everything comes from Chachma. The question is how it gets to finally its existence, identity. Some souls come directly from Atzilus to this world. Some souls are still in Atzilus in this world. As you know, the famous thing, Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, Moshe Leipzig time, that Moshe, when he was down here, was still in Atzilus. He never had a disconnect. From all the people, he was here and up there the same. And therefore, the same thing with the letter, the spheres. Everything comes from Chachma. But Chachma has to go to Bina, has to go to Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Chesed, and Yesod, and then it comes to Malchus. So that's our question. To answer that question, the Alter Rebbe is going to go and give an insight into the letters, which we started doing last week. Understanding the letters, and he starts saying of this: the letters of the speech are divided into two tracks. One track is the actual cutting of the sounds. That's one thing. You have sounds, and there's completely its own path. The sounds that it makes, every one of the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis. Another idea in speech is the thoughts that I'm going to say. I'm telling you a story. I'm telling you my feelings. I'm telling you a philosophical idea. I'm telling you a math equation. It's the thought. And these two things are actually on two separate tracks. Obviously, they're associated because they're going to work in as a team to develop a sentence, 2 + 2 = 4. So the sounds of 2 + 2 = 4, that comes from one part of my brain. That one comes, I should say my brain, that comes out one track. And the idea that 2 + 2 actually = 4, that's intellectual. So these two things come together, but they're two different things. And what we're going to explain is that the concept of a thought, that is an intellectual expressed idea, which has to go through the whole process. It's a flash of an idea. It's a development of an idea. Now, obviously, 2 + 2 = 4 is a very simple one. We could explain it very quickly. But sometimes you have equations or complexities that are very complex. I can't give you examples because I'm not a mathematician, but there are very deep, problematic things that you have someone who is very a mathematical genius could explain to you something, and it takes time to break it down to a student to understand it. Then you have that's a process of intellect. Then we said last week that the idea of the sounds are not coming through a process. And we explained that there are two general ways how every function we do is done. Either it's subconscious, called nature, or let's call it natural, the way Hashem made us. It's much kinder to God than to say nature. It's natural how Hashem made us, like digesting the food, like regulating our blood temperature, like the way our movements of our eyes to focus. We don't have to control and tell our eyes, okay, I need to zoom in on something. Automatically, Hashem made you. That happens by itself. The different parts of your brain that manage that, that's subconscious. Then you have parts that you got to focus. For an example, you want to learn how to play the piano. You have to learn each key, what it does, all the sounds, and then eventually you get very good at it. You can do it very quickly. But there is a system that you had to learn to go and play the piano or play the violin. So that is intellect. That means there's two things. There's subconscious, and then there's thinking. I had to do it. Now, granted, after playing for 20 years, I don't have to think as much, but the truth is, I'm just thinking faster. It's not that I don't think at all. You see, even in muscle memory, there's different ways to understand it. The way Hasidus sees us doing these functions is not that it's pure muscle memory without no thinking, without any thinking. It's that we think on these subjects very quickly. We have it down to a system, so we can play a song very quickly. A lot of people do it while reading notes. And they can read notes and play speeding fast. They don't have to think that my finger here is hitting there. That's the muscle memory, that I know where to put my fingers, like you're typing on a typewriter. But what you're doing, that's all intentional. As you can see, if you want to type a report, you're typing specifically certain letters, but your body knows how to do it. Easiest example is put on the gas or the brake. You don't have to think each time the gas or the brake. You know one's on the right, one's on the left. And the truth is, sometimes you have to ask yourself, 1 second, I don't even know which ones anymore. I got to think this. Because it's been done so many times, but you know that one's on the right, one's on the left, and what to do.
You probably think that the journey of tshuva is the same.
We're going to get to how it applies to our function soon. We're going to get to that. That's going to be
because at the beginning you are, and then you are.
Right. So the process of tshuva and there is a benefit to that and a flaw to that. Meaning, I don't want to get off track now, but when someone does tshuva or someone becomes more involved in Yiddishkeit at any point in their life, in the beginning, every single thing is calculated and done carefully. After a while, unfortunately, take a person saying the Shema. The first time you figure out how to read and you're saying it really carefully. The second time, very carefully. The 10th time, very carefully. At some point, you know it so well that you realize I can think about my shopping list while I'm saying the Shema, the Gesund, which isn't the quality. It's not a good thing. Meaning you have to be able to read, you have to be able to not just do it automatically, but to be able to maintain the focus. Saying putting on film, lighting a Shabbos candle, making a bracha. We come to a point that we can multitask. We can unfortunately daven while we're planning our day at the same time because we got so good at it. But the truth is, it's not that we became good at it. We stopped paying attention to what we're doing. But that's a separate thing to work on. But that's the same idea, but it's a separate point. Now, all these metaphors that we're giving, obviously, is to a point to explain how it is spiritually in the world. That's what we're going to get to. right now explaining it in the human body. But there's a third department. The first one is it's natural, nature. Second one is that it's all calculated. And the measuring tape, by the way, if you ever want a litmus test, is this calculated or automatic? The answer, the way we can use it, from what I understand, is could you explain it? For example, I can't explain how my eyes focus or how I have balance. I don't know how my equilibrium works. I don't know how my food is digested. But I could explain how I play a piano or how I do an instrument. I can't play it. But for someone who could play it, they can explain it. They can explain intricate things that they do, whether it's knitting or building or painting. You know because you've done it so much, but you can explain it. I can explain how I reach and grab out a bottle. I can't explain things that are instinct. I can't explain things that are without instinct, things that are natural, without any intellectual or purposeful intentional focus. The third department is very unique, and the only example that I know of is speech. Speech, the letters that we make, you see, when you have a violin or a piano, I think there's 72 keys on a piano. I don't know how many. There's a lot of keys. Every key in the piano has a particular sound. Every string on the bass or on a guitar has a certain sound. Every part of the violin, and depending how you come approach it, how long you touch it, how hard you hit it, you can create music. When it comes to your lips don't have a sound they make. Your lips have some very, very subtle behaviors. For an example, we gave it last week, and I accidentally took out the vav. The vav is part of it. So it's beis, vav, mem, pei, well, as bumf or bump. This is the 4 letters that are all your lips. I got distracted by the vav because the vav is really your lips and your teeth or something else, but it's primarily your lip, the vav. It's the lips, but it's really with another touch. That's why I didn't want to include it, but I looked back and I made a mistake. It has to be included. But the beis, the mem, and the pei, and the vav are all made by your lips. It's not your lips make these sounds. Your lips could make these sounds in one of 2 ways. There's 2 ways your lips can make the sound. One is like a bird. A bird, their sounds come from their lips or come from their physical function, which means the birds don't have inside their soul the power of speech. They have inside their soul the power of being a bird. They could build a nest. I tried, I can't. I can't build a nest, especially in those tiny little spaces. But a bird has other gifts. We have the gift of speech. And therefore, when we speak, we could speak as a human being, where we're speaking directly from our soul, and our lips are just expressing it. It's coming from the soul. Or you can speak like a bird, where it's just in the lips. It's a function that you could learn, like a speech therapist would teach somebody who can't speak. And they would tell you, put your lips together, blow out, go, okay, good. Now, Pesach, they could teach you how to make sounds. Not because it's natural, because you had a problem getting to your natural self, some sort of impediment, like there are many, it can be emotional or physical or intellectual impediments. A person can have a physical speech impediment, and you have to be taught how to do it. Then you're doing it more like a bird. Where a bird could be trained or a parrot to make certain sounds, but that's not coming from the soul. You see, there's something phenomenal about a human being. We take the whole world and we divide it into 4 categories. We have doimim, which is inanimate, things like rocks, water, sand. You have tzomeach, things that are plants, trees, all growth, all the world of plant life. You have the animal kingdom, which is called chai, it's alive. And that's the difference is, remember, doimim doesn't move. Tzomeach means to grow. Chai means it's alive, and the human being is called medaber. We speak. When we think about it, that's an odd name to give us. Is the quality of a human being that we speak, or a quality of a human being that we could think? What's our real quality of a human being? Wow, we could speak. Hi, hello. No, our quality is that we could think, but we don't call it that. You know why? Because thinking comes from one level of your soul, a very high level called seichel. Higher than that is dibur. Dibur comes from somewhere deeper. And actually, the quality of a human being is not that you can think, as great as it is. The quality is that we can speak. And this is why you find something phenomenal in the growth of a child. A child's born, and he learns different things. At some point, the child begins to understand. You can say, don't touch that, don't do this. But the child can't speak. If he understands, why can't he speak? I don't understand. He knows what it means, don't touch it. Why can't he say, why not? Why can't he ask questions? Why can't he articulate things? It's because speech comes from somewhere more advanced in understanding. You see, seichel is, and we don't think of it that way because people today, unfortunately, waste the power of speech. I'm not saying I'm innocent in this area, but we waste it, meaning we say silly things, we make jokes, we talk a lot. But the bottom line is, we take speech for granted. We don't realize speech is the greatest thing. If we look at God, God spoke and he created the world. He spoke and he gave us a Torah. God's speech is the essence of himself being shared. So the idea of speech is really a very, very high and higher than intellect. That's why the human being is not called a thinking species. We're called a speaking, because our quality is that we can speak, which is even greater than thinking, as we'll get to that further. But the bottom line is speech has the ability to tap into the deepest part of our soul, as you mentioned a number of times. If you want to, it says, there's a famous teaching that says, a lot I have learned from my teachers, even more from my colleagues, but most of all from my students. That's a famous thing. This idea has many interpretations. One of them is based on this discussion. What happens when you teach? You're forced to speak. If I want to give a class, and I can tell you this from experience, the more I give a class, whether it's on Tanya or a Sicha or a Maimer, my level of understanding is 10 times what I had when I learned it on my own. Because when you're forced to speak, or you have to speak, it draws from, that's why when Chavrusas learn together in Yeshiva, you take turns, each one saying it and talking. When you talk, it's good to learn out loud. It draws from inside you deep, 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 not just emotion, but intellect. We spoke many times as somebody who could be very emotional about something, and until they speak, they don't cry. They start speaking, and they get all emotional. You're crying. What happened? You get up, unfortunately, you see it by a funeral, you see it by happy events, by weddings, you see it by other occasions. A kid comes, and he starts telling you the story, he's crying. Why are you crying? Why, you might try to be theatrical, more drama? No. When you speak, it draws emotion, and when you speak, it draws intellect, because it's a higher place. Speech, by definition, is from a higher place, and this is a very key part of this topic here. Now, just remember, in God's name, Yud is Chachma, a Hey is Bina, Vav is the Midas, and the last Hey is Malchus, which is speech. So we're coming to see slowly that the last Hey is a very powerful idea of speech. What is the discussion here? What's really bothering us? Well, actually, I'll get to the discussion in a second. I don't want to jump ahead. Okay, let's do one thing at a time. Okay, so that's what we're up to here. The idea that speech comes, like I said, there's two parts to it. There's the cutting of the letters, and there's the thought. The cutting of the letters comes from deep within our soul. It doesn't come from the lips. It happens on the lips, but that comes from deep, what's called the either we can call it Seichel Hanelam, the deepest part of Seichel, or we can call it Rotzim, even higher, meaning it comes from higher than Seichel. That's what we have to know now when we start today's Tanya. Okay, I'm going to try and move along, try and finish at least these next two paragraphs here. So we're on page Kuf Zayin, and I'm going to go back to what we started yesterday or last week and read that very quickly and catch up to where we are today. Actually, I'm going to start from 4 lines from the bottom. We did this already. Starting from 5 lines from the bottoms. Ukenire bechush, page Kuf Zayin. Ukenire bechush. Okay, this is where we were really up to from last week. And as we see very clearly in reality, we're talking here about the way letters are functioned. It doesn't happen on a mechanical way like by a bird. It happens from a deep inside soul. That's something from deep inside expressive. Because the truth is, unlike every other function of our body, which we learned with a skill, like someone told you how to take the paintbrush and put it here, learn the basic, what do they call it? We have to learn the first keys. There's certain stuff you have to learn on the piano over and over and over. Mm-hmm. What? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's the first things you have to learn, and you guys hate doing it. But it teaches you the first steps. By speech, you just learn right away to make the sounds. There's no like steps. You learn to make a sound, and a kid can speak and say what he wants once he's old enough to speak, because it comes without a training. The body just uses the lips, the palate, the tongue, the teeth, etc., the throat, to express and cut certain sounds. And as we see clearly, the soul does not know and intend to express lekaven klal shinei tnuos hasfasayim b'shinuyim elu. It doesn't make an effort to say, okay, I want to say certain words. I'm going to put my lips together, and I'm going to say, but then if I want to make a mem sound, it's a little softer put together, and if it's even less, it's a, meaning you don't do that. It's automatically because it comes from the soul, and the soul has a direct connection to the lips. And it's really, he says, the way it works is your lips want to make the sound, and it calls forth from the soul the power of speech, which means it's the power of speech that's expressing itself, which is something very, very deep. And again, I can't overemphasize how we see from here the tremendous value in a human being, and especially a yid. Obviously, all human beings have the same quality of speech, but a yid, to use out this chush, this power of speech to the best of your ability. Hashem gave you this tremendous way to tap into your soul. Use it for good stuff. Use it for saying nice things about people, for saying a blessing, not to say things that are inappropriate or things that are nice, because this is the most powerful tool we have. Speech is extremely, extremely powerful. V'yeser nidakain. And where do you see this even more? Not in the enunciation of the letters, but in the enunciation of the vowels. If you look in the Hebrew language, which is like some languages, mainly Hebrew, that we have vowels underneath the consonants. So all the letters have a sound. 22. By the way, one of the questions someone asked last week about other languages. So first of all, this is true by all human beings. This is not just a Jewish thing. This is all human beings have the power of medaber. The 22 sounds are the only 22 sounds that there are. Now, we sometimes combined a couple sounds to make a third sound, like saying there are four, I don't know how many primary colors there are, 4 or 5, whatever, red, yellow, blue. Yeah, there's certain primary colors. These are the 22 primary sounds, even though you'll find, for example, in Yiddish is a sound that's not in Hebrew. It's the ch sound, like chepanisht, don't kvetch. You don't have in Hebrew the ch. What is it? It's a tes and a shin together. You take a tes and a shin, you put it together, it's ch. And many other sounds. Plus, je we don't have either, but the truth is, je is really a gimel. Now, je, the way we say je today is a dalet and a shin. We put a dalet and a shin together, and we say a shin, je. But the truth is, if the Sephardi proper pronunciation, see the 22 letters, we as Ashkenazic Jews have lost a lot of the true accurate sounds. The difference between a ches and a chaf, an ayin and an aleph. We have certain sounds. We say an ayin, it sounds like an aleph. An ayin really has a very interesting end sound to it, like yankel. It comes from the throat more. So there's certain letters that we don't really do exactly. And even the Sephardim, they say they have tradition. I think some of them, they're probably accurate, some are less accurate. But they have, for example, a gimel is really a j sound. Like they say, they have different pronunciations, and the ches is a different sound. All these letters, the difference between a tough and a suf is not how we do it. We do a tough and a suf. Or if you're Sephardi, they tough and tough. No, it's tough and a thuf. The true sound of the suf is more like a th sound, like with, like a thuf. It's again, we don't have them today in our language because I don't know, they were lost somewhere along the way. But a lot of original Sephardim still have a lot of that old traditions. Chet is much more guttural than a chaf. It's a little more of a hay mix than a chet. Listen to Ofer how he says it. He gets it good. But the bottom line is that all the other languages that have other sounds that we don't have in the Hebrew letters, it's really a combination of a couple of letters together. Like I said, the example of a tes and a shin or dalet and a shin that make a ch sound, etc. But the 22 sounds are the only 22 sounds that someone makes. By the way, one of the biggest proofs that we don't think about this stuff intentionally is the average person, especially if you're not a speech therapist or learning Tanya or Chassidus on this subject, you have no idea that there's a special way that there's 22 letters but divided up into 5 different processes. Who thinks about this? Who in their lifetime, unless you're learning the subject either in science or you're learning it in Chassidus, takes the time to think, okay, where does the ches come from? That's my throat. The lamed, it's the palate. Who thinks about this? It's stuff that you don't think about, which proves us that we don't have to think about to make the letters. Because even if you never learn this, you know exactly how to make the sounds. Exactly, you could say aleph, beis, vez, gimel, dalet, hey, vav, zayin, ches, without having to know this information. Okay. He says you see this even more, not just in the letters, but also in the vowels, in the kodesh. When the soul wants to express in the mouth, nekudas kamats, the vowel kamats. And now, by the way, again, we have in Ashkenaz, there's a kamatz and a patach. In Sfaradim, they're both really ah. They don't say like Shabbos, they say Shabbat. Not in the original Sfaradim?
Yeah, Sfaradim also say
Okay, I don't know that. Okay, thank you. Okay, but let's go back to how we say Ashkenazim. Certainly, we have Shabbos and we have Chanukah, 2 different sounds, or ah, kametz or patach. That is also little subtleties we have to make. Now, obviously, when you learn the names of letters, you find out kametz means to close, like the kmitza. One of the things the Kohen Gadol would do, or the Kohen would do, was take flour and squish it into his hand. Or like called mitzvah hanefesh, squeezing out somebody. Mitzvah means to squeeze, like mitzvah juice. You squeeze out the juice. So kametz, it means the closing of the mouth. You close your mouth and say a kametz. Patach means like paseach, like open. So the word pasach tells you you're opening your mouth wider, say a pasach, you're closing it more to make a kametz. These are things, again, we don't have to think about. It happens automatically from our soul. See, as furthermore, we can have multiple layers of how exactly the letter is being cut, not just in its sound, but in its type of sound. It could be, for example, the same b could be ba, It could be ba, it could be b, it could be boo, depending which vowel it has. So again, not only is there expression in the sound, the consonant, but even in the vowel part of it, there's also changes, and again, based on deep within our soul. That's why when you say a come, it's automatically your mouth contracts a little bit. When you say the pasach, it's the a sound. Nifsachim hasosayim. Your lips open up wider. The next page. It's not that you think, okay, I want to say a patach, I'm going to send a message, I'm going to open my mouth. I want to say a come, I close my mouth. These are automatic behaviors from day one. It didn't wait till you said it many, many times and you got to the stage of what you call muscle memory or very, very quick thinking like typing or a piano. Always, you never had to think, even as a young child, when you taught the kid to say tati, you never had to think, okay, I got to take my mouth and go ta. You don't have to do that. The kid knows automatically because there's no thought process required. On the other hand, when a kid wants to grab something, in those early stages, he has to think, okay, take the fingers, pull something, because that's a focused behavior, which is a motor skill that requires actual paying attention. Again, I'm not the expert to understand the biology of this. I'm just explaining what it says in Chassidus. I'm not the expert to go and say, one second, this is how it works. This is how Chassidus explains it, and I'm assuming this is how biology would agree, or science. No need to go into greater length, something which is so simple, something which is so understood, and something which is so easily intellectualized. The call maskil to every person that has intelligence. Anyone who studies the subject knows that the cutting, the expression of the actual letters, is higher than the seichel, which means it's not something you have to think about to do. Move on, and that which is understood. It comes from, and this is the key we want to say here. It comes from the deepest part of our seichel, which is called seichel hanelam. That we don't think about. You see, when we're functioning and thinking, we only operate on bina. The while chachma and bina are two levels of intellect. Chachma is the first dot, and bina is the building and expression. We can't really think in chachma. I mean, our great minds know how to havein b'chachma. Bina. There's an idea to try and bring bina into chachma to bina. But in general, you don't think in chachma. You think in bina, because chachma is like that flash of information that you can't think. That has to come on its own, or come because you stimulate it. Either because you thought about a subject for a long time and it pops into your head, or because randomly sometimes something pops into your head. An idea, a solution, a breakthrough of a solution, an answer to a question. But that's not something you think. Bina is a process of thinking. That's why when we talk about a Gan Eden, we call it Bina. And that's why we say the Eden, the source, is called Chachma, because no one sees that. Ayin L'Rasa, no one sees it. You can't tap into it. But Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, the garden of or from Eden, that garden is Bina that we can meditate and contemplate on. So he says here, the idea that we have in general in Gan Eden is the idea of Bina. And the idea that you have in Eilam Hazeh, now let's go back to our thought, Eilam Hazeh, this physical world, is deeply connected to the source of Chachma. So it sounds like it's either the same, because also Gan Eden comes from Chachma. Or you can say that it comes even from a higher place, as we'll see. It comes from the earliest stage of Seichel for the one who speaks. And this is what we said before, and that's why a child can't speak, even though he understands. Because speaking comes from a higher place than understanding. A child, you might say, why can't he speak? Because speaking is much more advanced than thinking. We always take the other way around, because a person could speak without thinking, which is sad. You could bulba, you could hakachainik. You could talk and talk. But the truth is, that's wasting a resource that's incredible. But by definition, speech comes from a higher place than seichel, and that's why it starts later in the body. First, a child could think, he can understand. A little child you watch, they can figure out stuff. It's very cool to watch an infant, a 1-year-old, figure and try to do stuff. And then when he's 2 or 3, depending on the child, he can speak. And what's interesting is speaking has nothing to do with intelligence. You have people that are really smart and are late starters in talking. You have people who are not as brilliant and start talking earlier because it's not connected. One comes from a deep place in the soul, and one is a way of articulating thoughts. They're not really connected. They're two different operating systems in the brain. I don't know if it's the right brain and the left brain, etc., but it's two different parts of the brain. That's why a child doesn't speak even though he can already understand. And this also answers our question before, why we're called medaber, not called maskil, why we're not called a species of thinking, because that's not as impressive as speeches of speaking. And when speech takes place in other creatures, like a parrot, that's not speech from the soul, that's speech from the material, physical things, like a ventriloquist can make sounds up, or anyone can make sounds up. That's not real sounds. That's imitated sounds. That's all sounds in the soul. But now we're left with a big question, and that's what we're going to go to the next paragraph. The question is, we started off saying that the Gan Eden and Elam Haba was created from Yud, and Elam Hazah was created from Hey. Not true. They're both created from Yud. The Hey comes from the Yud, and the meaning Yud, the Chachma of Elam Gan Eden, it comes from Yud. This also comes from Yud. Why are we saying it comes from Hey? Hey comes from Yud, meaning it seems like they both come from the same place of Chachma. There's a way that possibly even this is a higher level of Chachma. It's coming from a deeper part of the soul. So why do we start off the whole chapter saying Ki B'Ka with Yud and Hey? Hashem created the heavens, the world. That Yud created Gan Eden and He created Elam Hazeh, this physical world. They're both created from Chachma. What do we? That's the question here. To answer this, we'd have to go into two famous words. When I say famous, they're very fundamental and discussed words in Chassidus, and the words are called Chaimer and Surah. Every single thing in the world is made of a Chaimer and made of a Surah. And the definitions can become very, very refined and subtle as you move out of the physical concepts. I'll tell you what that means. This bottle here, let's a little complicated. Let's keep it for simple here. This shofar is made out of, I guess, the same material as my nails are made out of. So the material is, I don't know what it's called scientifically, but it's the nail. Let's call it the fingernail. The fingernails are the horn material. So what is it? It's horn material. That's the chaimer. The tzura, it's made into a functioning shofar. Or easier example, if I have a styrofoam and the styrofoam becomes a cup. The styrofoam is the chaimer. The tzura becomes a usable cup. You understand? The chaimer is the matter.
Material.
Chomer is the substance, the material. Tzura means the description, like how you could, what it becomes. What it really means is you can call it function, you can call it purpose. It depends on what. It's usually function or purpose. So let's say, for an example, this is paper. Its function is to be a paper towel. This table is made out of wood, but it's called a table. Why don't we call it wood? Could you everyone gather around the wood? Because it's actually not even wood. It's some fake material. So it's not even a good example. There's no wood in here, I guarantee you. But the idea of meaning everything, examples, like I'll give you an example. Yale Connor, I was listening to his class on the subject. He says that a chair, its chaimer, its substance is wood. Its function, what it really has become is a chair. You can even go a step deeper. Take the original wood, the branch of the tree where this chair was built from. Its chaimer is wood. Its surah is that it has the ability to grow, it has the ability to be burnt. Meaning, what's function? What is there besides the physical? Is what possibilities, potential? What can it be used for? It's more of the identity of it, not just the physical makeup. What's the identity? What's your surah? It's like sometimes you have a kid in yeshiva that you say, he's a good, nice kid who weighs 180 pounds, but he has no surah, no personality, no qualities, what's your journey? Who are you? I know you're a physical person. Okay, you're good. You're here. Who are you? What's your tzura? What's your identity? What's your muhus? And you have always the physical existence and then a little more about it. That's chaimer and tzura. So for an example, let's take the sound I'm making now. I'm going to make some sounds. Right? I make some sounds. Those are perfect. So you have sounds I can make. That's the chaimer of words. But if I say table, now my words have become with a structure. It's not just words. That's a T, a B, a L, and E, or in Hebrew, shulchan. It actually becomes a description of something. So every word has its chaimer, its physical sounds that's being made. If you listen to it, you can hear the word being said, and you have the meaning of the word, the message. And as for an example, I'll give you an example, an easy example to understand it. If I was speaking right now in Chinese, I can't speak Chinese, but if I could, you could all hear the chaimer of what I'm saying, but you can't hear the tzura. The content of what's there is missing. You can hear and listen to the sounds of the chaimer of the actual words, but not the content. Okay, thank you.
Could we be biased?
Yes,
Could we
we're
be
always
biased?
biased.
But
Well-
you don't feel the same things when you're talking other language than Hebrew? When you're listening to something in Hebrew or
But it
you're
should be.
talking, you feel there's some communication with your nefesh. I
Well,
don't
that's
feel
something
that
else.
communication with when I'm talking other languages.
That's a separate idea. The Hebrew is a holy tongue. So now Hebrew or let's go Lashon Kodesh has a certain sanctity to the letters. But here we're talking about another point. We're not talking about what has more feeling or hegesh. We're talking about simply like a table. A table could be used for bad stuff too. We're not talking about a table is good or bad. We're talking about the wood is the material. The table is its structure. So you have the same thing in letters. You have in every single thing you're going to have it. The chaymer and the tzura. It's in everything. So now we're going to answer our question like this, and I'll tell you what the answer is going to be, and then we're going to try and read it now. It's true that the chaymer, the function, the chaymer is part of the letters. We'll see that comes from one place, and the tzura comes from another place. We had a question: does it come from hey, or does it come from yud? And the answer is going to be: it depends if we talk about the chaymer or the tzura. In letters, in words, and therefore also translated in our universe, in the physical world, we're going to have some things which come from yud, some which come from hey, as we'll see as we go through this. So basically, what we're saying here is that now sticking to the metaphor of words, we ask, do words come from yud or come from hey? Or elam hazeh come from yud or come from hey? The answer is going to depend if we're talking about the chaymer or we're talking about the tzura. Are you talking about the matter or its, let's call it its description or purpose? Let's call it purpose better. The answer on page 214. We'll do one more paragraph. It's a short one. The letters are actually made up of a chaymer and a tzura. Another way to use a synonym for the same exact words is pnimius v'chitzonius. Chaymer would be the chitzonius, what you see. Pnimius would be the tzura, whatever it is. What's the tzura? In other places, it's called body and soul. The body of the thing and the spirit of the thing, the soul of the thing. So you have different words to say the same thing, either chaymer and tzura, or you could say guf and neshama, you could say chitzonius and pnimius, different ways to say the same two things. Now, what does that mean? Even though its source comes from the earliest stage of seichel, and we said before it comes from the desire of the soul. So we said before, it comes from the letters come from the deepest place. Zui bechinas suras. If you take a letter, one sound of a letter, the form of the letter, that comes from the deepest part of your soul. That comes from Ratzon and Nefesh, comes from Seichel and Nelim, comes from the deepest part. But the matter of the letter, and we'll go and fine-tune this as we go, the matter of the letter, the chaymer, that comes from the hey. He says, but the chaymer, the matter of the letter of each sound, and its a way it's actually cut or enunciated from the mouth, which is the external part of the letter. Remember this, we spoke a long time ago in Shayim from the Emunah. We said that there's the earliest stages of speech. Where does speech begin? Speech begins in the next to your heart. Somewhere when you speak, it pushes out some air. That ear, we said, is the hey. That's why the original core sound of word is called hey. Speech is called hey, because that's the earliest stage is sound without any cutting. That can come out as a, meaning that ear coming out can come out in many different ways. If it stays in the throat, then it's one of the five that's in the throat. If it comes out with a bit, it's not sounding in the throat. The interaction or the friction is taking place in the lips or taking place in the palate or in the tongue and the teeth. Meaning this ear coming up, the reason why it sounds like a hey is because it's hitting the throat. It would sound like a bit if I would let it bypass the throat and hit my lips. So the words that we say, the letters that we say, has two sources. Its function starts in the essence of my soul. Its sound, the physical sound, starts from the ear next to my heart. And that's what comes up when I speak. And that comes not from the yud, it comes from the hey. That's why it's called the hey, the ear sound. Let's see this inside. This I wanted to mention, this is a very deep chapter, which means we're talking about some ideas that aren't so simple, But again, if we have to, we go over this a second time to make it clear. But this is the concept. But the matter, the chaymer of the letters, the gufis havasan, and the way it comes into existence, that refers to the external nature of a letter. It comes from the ear, the breath that comes from the heart. That is an earliest stage of a pure, unmodified sound. When I say pashat, it means it's not yet been decided what the sound is. It's an unmodified sound, just the ear. It comes from the throat, and then once it comes up, and it's only once it comes out and it hits one of those 22 points. It's 5 different areas, 5 different families. Let's say each family has a few letters, and when it comes out, it's going to fall either into, like we said, the family of the lips, the tongue, the palate, the throat, or the teeth. And then in each one of those, it's going to decide if it's going to be a mem, a beis, a pei, etc. Or in the throat, it's aleph, hey, ches, or ayin. Or in the lips, is lamed, tes, different ones that it does, the tongue. So you say like this. It's then going to be decided later. So the sound that it makes, the actual cutting of the sound, that comes from the ear inside you. It's the surah, the description, which comes from the depth of our soul. And he says what the sounds are. Acha, aleph, ches, hey, ayin, me'agarin, from the throat. Gimel, Yud, Chaf, Kuf, Me'achech. Each one, where it comes from different parts of our palate. Umifta Hevel, who is hey asak rilacholu. And the actual source of the sound, meaning that material, it's like blowing. It'll be like if someone takes an instrument, a flute, right? A flute is very different than our body, because the flute, each hole already has a predetermined sound. If you blow into it, which holes you cover will determine the sound coming out. But what you're putting in there is neutral. And again, every instrument has different. If you're blowing, different sounds that you make with the instrument. But that what you're blowing into the instrument is a neutral sound. That's what comes up. What comes up is neutral. When does it determine when it hits one of those 22 points or expressions of cutting? That's when it decides. But the actual voice is a neutral sound coming up, and that's called hey, which is asaklil, a very soft letter. What's the softest letter in the Hebrew 22 letters? The hey. Every other letter has a little bit of roughness to it. The hey is like, they're very soft. That's why it's called asaklil, the soft letter. And that is the source of the chaymer. As you mentioned, there are 3 different words we can use for chaymer and surah. We can say chaymer and surah. We say panimius and chatzerius, which means the inside and the outside. Or we could say the shama and guf. That chaymer, or that guf, or that chatzerius, comes from the ear. It's coming up from my throat. Terem is chalkusa l'chaf beis before it gets divided into one of the 22 letters. This is to answer our question why we say Eilu Hazeh is created with hey. It's referring to the lower aspect or the chitzonius part of a letter, which is the chaymer, not the surah. What I'm going to do is actually next week I'm going to start from this paragraph again, because it was a lot to unpack, and I think this will sort of settle in this, and we'll start again next week from the same paragraph. I'll be able to sort of digest it, because the idea of chaymer and surah takes time to absorb. What do I mean by chaymer? What do I mean by surah? So let's take the time now. Try and do is over the week get some good metaphors or examples that can better explain this idea. But with the basic thing, we answer the question, which we're going to see next week. We have to be satisfied with this answer. We're going to have a follow-up question. But the answer was, how could we say that the hey of God's name, or the Eilam Hazeh, is created from hey when we say it's created from the yud? Because the metaphor of this world is the letters. So we said letters themselves have 2 aspects. There's an aspect that comes from the hey, and an aspect that comes from the yud. The chaymer comes from the hey, and the tzura comes from the yud. We'll go back and re-explain this, God willing, next week. And but this isn't the easiest of chapters, but it is also a very fundamental chapter, which means once we have these ideas set, these are used a lot of times in Hasidic in classes on a sicha or a mimer, where it's going to discuss, do I see here, hey, could you pass me the plastic, the water on the cap? Or do you say, pass me the water bottle? Well, the chaymer is plastic. Oh, there's a paper coating too. So same with a pen. Could you pass me that tube of plastic with a thing inside it? It's a pen. So the chaymer is a plastic with an ink tube, and the tzura it's a pen. It's like, we don't say, biological matter, come here. We say, no, Mr. Goldberg, come here. But he's a bunch of biological matter. Yeah, that's his chaymer. His tzura he's Mr. Goldberg. So everything in the world, or it's a book. A book could be a bunch of paper, stapled together or bound, or it's a book. Every single thing has a chayim, the material, and the same thing as a letter. A letter being said, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, has the chayim and the tzura. And as a matter of fact, it goes much, much, much deeper. There are books written just on the letters themselves to understand them. But this is like I don't want to say the surface, but this is the basics of understanding a letter as chayim and tzura, the matter and the purpose or the function. Okay, we'll stop here.